What's going on, YouTubers? Welcome to another episode of Super Retro Geek. And today I'm going to be doing something a little different. A few episodes ago, I had talked about what I use for screen recording, and my platform of choice right now is Android. Now, that's where I'm going to be doing most of my recording, but where I do most of my work is actually on my desktop, or in this case, my laptop. And if you're probably wondering what do I use, well, I don't use Windows and I don't use Mac. This is what I use. And if you don't know what this is Linux, or more specifically, Linux Mint. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about why I don't use Windows or Mac. And for all the Windows and Mac lovers out there, please don't be mad at me. This is just my opinion. And I just want to share some of my thoughts of why I think you should give Linux a shot. Okay, and I have 6 reasons why I choose Linux and why I don't use Windows or Mac. Okay, the first reason is Linux is free, as in freedom. Now, whenever you buy a Mac or a Windows device, a portion of that is actually to pay for the operating system. So, if you want the operating system, you just can't go get it for free unless you do it illegally. But who does that anymore? But for Linux, I could just go to the website, like in this case Linux Mint, which is what the version I'm using, and I could just download the whole operating system for free. Now, you cannot do that on a Windows or a Mac. And how is that possible? Well, Linux is it's an open source software, so it's community based. So thousands of developers around the world, whether they're individuals in foundations, organizations, or companies, are actively working together to produce this software, which is amazing. And a lot of the software, even since the beginning, it was very collaborative, very community driven. And if you want a good example, I mean, a lot of the social media right now, Facebook, YouTube, and so forth, they're all community driven. But this is how software was developed, and I think it's the best way to do it. Okay, so that's definitely the first and biggest reason. It's free. The second reason is security. So for anyone who's had a Windows machine, this is nothing new to you. You probably are very familiar with this, and you probably have an antivirus program running right now. For Unix, I mean for Apple, not so much because it actually is built up upon Unix, and which Linux is also based upon as well. So which means it's fairly secure. Okay. Now, Windows, last I checked, there's over 1 million known viruses, malware, trojans in the wild. And what that means in the wild is it's out there in the public domain being spread. Now, in Linux, there's very few, if any, in the wild. And this is on Wikipedia, and everything on the internet is true, but Linux has proven time and time again that it is a secure system. And here, this is a total list of all the rootkits, trojans, viruses, worms, malware, so forth. And if you look here, there's less than 50. Just listen to that again. Less than 50 for all of Linux. Compare that to the over a million that are available in Windows, and you could see the magnitude of the security problem there. Now, I will say this, no system is 100% secure, but most Linux users, they don't need a antivirus program. Most of the virus programs on Linux, they're actually there to scan for Windows viruses. Ironic, I know. So the third reason why I choose Linux is because it's fast and it's stable. When I say fast, for people who are used to Windows machine, they know that when you first buy Windows, it's fast, but over time, it becomes really slow, and you would have to defrag or just redo all of Windows. And that's mainly due to the file system that Windows uses. It's just crappy. Now, Apple's Mac is a lot better, but it still slows down over time as well. Linux, it's as fast as when you first put it on, and then when you use it right now, because of its very efficient file system that it uses, file management system. And also the requirements for Linux are much lower. And let me give you an example of how low the requirements are and how fast this is. Now, just remember that I'm recording my whole screen, so the speed might not be at full speed as you might normally get. But this is the machine that I'm using. This thing is a beast. It's an old beast, as a matter of fact. This is my machine. This is a Dell D810, and the D810 was actually first released right here. This is the review from February 2005. So my machine is 9 years old. Now, if you were to try this on a Windows or Mac, it's not going to work. The hardware would not be able to support the software. But with Linux, Linux works great, especially on older machines. So why can't they do it on a Windows or Apple machine? Well, simple. They want you to buy more hardware in a few more years. Okay, so that's the third reason. And also, Linux is very stable. If you've had a Windows machine, you're probably very used to the blue screen of death, or crashes. The Macs don't crash as much and they don't freeze as much, but that's primarily because they're based upon Unix, which is great. For me personally, my Linux machine, I've only had it crash and freeze 3 to 4 times the whole year, and that's primarily because I was experimenting with something. So that is rock solid. Okay. Now the fourth reason why I choose Linux is because it's very customizable. You can do some customization in Windows and Mac, but with Linux, I could customize it down to the font, down to the even the scroll bar. And so let me give you some examples. Okay. So Linux Mint, obviously you see it right now. That's how it looks. But here's another version of Linux, the most popular version actually. It's Ubuntu. It looks completely different. Okay, and yet here's another version, a KDE version. This is very, very pretty. It looks a lot like a Mac. And so there are like hundreds, maybe even 1,000 different versions of Linux. And even though it looks different, all of them are Linux underneath, which is amazing. So for me, I just keep the standard default look because I like it simple and I like it fast, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time changing how it looks. Okay, so that's the fourth reason. Now the fifth reason is 95% of everything that I would normally do on a Windows machine or a Mac, I could get done in Linux. And the reason I say 95% is the other 5% is gaming, which is primarily Windows, and then some of the software is just not available for Linux. However, when I install this version of Linux, some stuff's already pre-built in. I have a CD burning software, I've a media player, and I've also downloaded some video editors and a recording desktop software. Okay, and for office related stuff, I have LibreOffice and a PDF viewer. LibreOffice is very similar to Microsoft Office. I could actually edit Office files in here as well. I have all my browsers built in, and I have my image editing. I even have something that's like Photoshop. This is also available in Windows or Mac, but it runs really well on Linux. And every single one of these pieces of software, they're free. I didn't have to pay a single penny. Now, I cannot say that at all about Windows and Mac. Okay? And the final reason why I choose Linux over Windows or Mac is control. Now, whenever you buy a Windows or a Mac, you actually don't own the hardware because of the software involved, especially with Windows. They're constantly checking you, making sure your software is legal and is authenticated. Now, Apple does the same thing. And if you wanted to put a different operating system on there, especially now, it is very difficult to do, especially on Apple machines. So Windows machines, the same thing. Now, with my machine right now with Linux, I could put it on or off any version of Linux. I could do whatever I want to it whenever I want without Big Brother watching me. Now with the Windows and Mac, eventually I'm gonna have to buy a new machine because that's what they do. But with Linux, nobody's watching me. I could do whatever I want. But the funny thing is, you're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on these Windows and Mac devices, which you really don't own. They own you. And with my Linux box, I didn't pay anything, and I could do whatever I want, which is, once again, that's really ironic. So those are my six main reasons why I choose Linux and why I don't use Windows and a Mac. And now, if you're wondering, wow, I've never used Linux before, well, let me give you an interesting fact. On this past Google I/O, Google reported that there's been 1 billion active activations of Android around the world. And what most people don't know is that Android is built on top of the Linux kernel. So there's over a billion people. You're probably using a version of Linux right now if you're using Android, which is funny. So those are my reasons for today, and I would love to hear any of your comments and any of your thoughts. And please give a shot and try out something new. I'm gonna post a link to the Linux Mint website where you can download Linux Mint and try it out for yourself. So that's it for today's episode of Super Retro Geek. We'll see you on the next episode.